Hello everybody, I'm Miss Linda. Today I'm going to show you how to paint using watercolors and using a special artist named Claude Monet. He was an Impressionist artist and he liked to show how light reflects on different surfaces, and he used the techniques of Impressionism to show his artwork. I'm going to show you a painting we're going to be making. This is a watercolor, and it's water lilies, just like Monet's water lilies. And you can see there's water, and there's water lilies, and there's we've used not just watercolor, but I've also used some colored pencils. And if you look at the water, it has a shimmery look to it, and that's a special technique. And the special technique that we used was salt. So that's going to be our special added surprise. So join me in our painting of Impressionist magical water lilies with Claude Monet. Okay everyone, now we're ready to start our water lily watercolor. The materials you're going to need for your watercolor painting are watercolor paper. You're going to need a pencil. You're going to need some watercolors. If you have a larger brush, that's better to use. A lot of times the paints already come with a brush, but if you have a larger brush, this is really good to use because it holds the water a lot, and we're going to need to make this very watery, so it's going to have a lot of water in it. And you're also going to need to use salt. After we put the watercolor on our water painting, we're going to be using salt. That's what gives it that special sparkly shimmer effect to it. And then after all of that's dry, we're going to be using our watercolor pencils, if you have watercolor pencils, or you can just use plain colored pencils. Now, these are all the supplies you'll need, but you'll also need to use a cup so that you can put a lot of water in it and rinse your brush out, and maybe a paper towel so that things don't get too wet. We can easily clean it up. So let's get started on our watercolor. Okay, so I am ready to get started on my Claude Monet's water lily watercolor, and I want to show you where my inspiration is, and you're going to make one similar to this, or if you have some other changes in mind, you can certainly do those. So what I want to do first is I'm going to take my pencil and very lightly I'm going to mark in where I want to put the water lilies, which is going to be on the bottom, and then kind of think about where the tree branches and leaves might be. So they're going to be sort of on the top, and they kind of look like spaghetti or like little pieces of ribbon, and I'm going to lightly, very lightly with my pencil go over that, and then kind of show the water lilies, and they're kind of oval looking. And remember in the story how the Julie found the lily looked a lot like a flower or a star. So we're going to keep those in mind while we are doing our water lilies. So I'm going to put this aside, and I have my pencil, and I'm just going to very lightly, and they're kind of like little squiggles. That's going to be on the side, on one side, maybe some little squiggles here. Very, very lightly. I'm barely even touching the paper. Very lightly coming down like little squiggles. And then I could even kind of bring a little bit down on the sides. And I'll have some water lilies, and they don't really look like, when I'm looking at them in water, they don't really look like circles. They look like they're kind of turned over on their side. So they're going to be like a squash circle or an oval. So I'm going to make it look kind of long like that. And I'm going to put some in. The bigger ones are going to be closer to you, so they're going to be a little bit bigger. And the further they are away from you, they'll be just smaller. So you can see these ones that are closer to me, these down here are going to be bigger, and then they'll get a little bit smaller as they go away. And I'm going to put a little bit, I'll leave this right here, and I'm going to put a little bit all over. Now I don't want to put a lot of work into this because I am going to fill up my paper with watercolor and water. So I think this is probably good for now. I'm going to put my pencil aside and I'm going to use my watercolors. So I have my water here and I have a paper towel in case it gets too wet or if I want to wash out my brush. And what I want to do is I want to take some water in a cup and I'm going to put it on my brush and I'm going to use the colors. I'm going to use some greens out here and I'm going to use some blues and maybe even some purple. So that's going to look really nice. And I want to use a lot of water. So I'm going to drop in some water onto my papers and see how I'm kind of picking it up and just kind of dropping it onto that paint. So a little drop here, a little drop there. And I think I'll use a little bit of yellow too. As you can see in the green, there is some yellows also. So that'll be nice. So before I switch my colors, I'm going to make sure I wash out my brush really well. All right, so I'm going to start with some blue over here. So I'm going to take a little blue and I'm going to get that pretty blue color. I'm going to just make little circles. I'm not going all over my paint, my table. I'm just doing little circles and it's okay if some are lighter than the others. I'm going to just keep filling that up, making it very watery. Add a little bit more blue. Look at that pretty blue. Little tiny circles. I'm just going to add to it. A little bit blue. There. I'm going to put some purple in here also. Look at that. So it's kind of nice. I can kind of blend them in a bit. A little more water. So you want a good amount of water, but we don't want it the paper to get all creased. So we just want to just make sure we work through the watercolor as best as we can. Add a little more purple. A little more water. A little more blue. So I really like the way that the blues and the purples mix. They look really nice together. More purple. Fill that up. Just like Monet's garden. And a little more purple. Very nice. Okay. Now, I'm going to leave, that's my water. I'm going to now rinse my brush really well. Even my water turns blue. And I'm going to start using some green. Now, I don't want to get any of the green in the middle. I'm going to keep the green on the outsides. I'm going to take some just gonna kind of bring in those branches. Bring some more in this way. So now what I'm thinking of is, because this is my impressionistic painting, that I don't have to put all those details in, because what I'm going to do after this dry, when this dries, it's going to then become, I'm going to be using my colored pencils. So those will be really nice to add to all that detail. So I'm going to be putting this in, putting in the branches. Just keep adding in the paint. Okay, now I'm going to try and put in some of the water lilies. I'm going to take a little bit of the green. I'm just going to kind of put like a hint. Just outline a little shade there. This has a lot of blue in it. Just gonna put it in there just a little bit. I'll go back over it when it's dry. Add a little bit more here. And a little bit more over here. Now, if you can see, I have some lines forming here. If you don't like that, the reason why we need so much water is because we're going to add the salt next. If you don't like so much and you think it's settling in these little spots too much, you can take a piece of paper towel and just kind of blot it in. That's called blotting. And just take some of that water out so it's not so much. It'll still come out really nice. So you can take a little bit in. Just kind of blot it in a bit there. Okay. So now here's the fun part. I'm going to take some salt and I'm going to put a little bit on the palm of my hand. I'm going to just kind of, and you might want an older person to help you with this. Just going to put a little bit in my hand like this, and I'm going to sprinkle. I'm going to take a pinch. And I'm going to just kind of sprinkle it all around. And then you can already see, remember to go all around, not just in one spot, where those little pieces of salt settle in. Just make sure it goes in there. Where those pieces of salt will settle in will then become white and give it a sparkly effect. So it'll give it a look like this. You see how the white looks almost sparkly? It's actually a chemical reaction with the watercolor. So I'm gonna let that dry and we'll come back to it when it's dry. Okay, so my watercolor has dried, and as you can see, look at those beautiful shimmery colors with the salt. Now, the salt you can still feel on top. You can just kind of brush those off, brush the salt pieces off, and you'll still have this beautiful look to it. So what I want to do next is add the water lilies and the green moss or leaves that come down within the water lilies picture, and then I'm going to also add our water lilies. So the colors that I've chosen for my colored pencils are some yellow, oranges, green, blue. I have two different blues, some burgundy or like a reddish brown type of color, brown, and I have a little bit of black. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with making my water lilies. So I'm going to use, and I don't have to fill up the whole water lilies. I can fill up Oh, well, just a little bit. I'm going to use a little green, a little orange, brown, and maybe a tiny bit of red. So those are the colors I'm going to use for my water lilies. So I'm going to start with the green, and I'm going to outline. That means I'm just going to go around the edges. And I don't have to do the whole thing. I'm going to kind of just color it in a little bit. So it has a little bit of green. Then I'm going to take my orange and do a little bit of orange too. So I can leave it like this, or I can go ahead and add that water lily flower. So to add the flower, it kind of looks a little like a star. So I'm just going to make little petals. So I'm going to use my orange again, and I'm going to make like a little petal, like a teardrop shape. So there's one there. Do another one here, and maybe another one there. And then I'm just going to color it in. I'm going to use my reddish orange color and just kind of go over these things. And if you make a mistake, you can easily just use an eraser, because these are colored pencils, and just put that in there. There you go. And now I'm going to go to my next water lily. Kind of do the outline again around the edges, color it in a little bit, because we still want to show that the water is around it. Give it a little hint of a water lily. These little buds. And give it a little orange color. Okay. Now I can also add maybe a little yellow, might be nice in here with the green, because the yellow will pick up some of that green and just make the green a little bit lighter. So I'm just going to go around, add a little yellow to these. So now you can see the water lilies are really starting to pop and really come out. So I'm just going to keep going around, filling up my page. And maybe there's two on one lily pad. Maybe I'll make a smaller one here. Right. A little more yellow. And I'm just going to work my way around the painting. You can add a little bit of cream, whatever you decide. A little more orange. And I think I'll move on to this lily too. Okay, so now I have a couple lilies here. I'm going to go ahead and bring in, excuse me, some little, some of the branches and some of the leaves. And they do look a little like spaghetti in some ways. So I'm just going to make little squiggles. And I'm going to use green. I'm going to use a little yellow even. And a little brown. Just kind of bringing them down like they're hanging. Now I can also use a little bit of blue. That might be kind of nice to bring out some of these colors. And I can also shade with my blue on the water lilies. I can kind of go around part of the edges. Just kind of add to that so it looks like it's floating. And I'm just gonna keep coloring my water garden. I'm gonna bring it out over here. So now you can see it's really starting to look like a water garden. Now, what I'd also like to do, and I could just keep on filling this in, I can also take some of my blue and show kind of the pattern on the water. If you see here, there's just kind of, if I use these lines, these are called horizontal lines. They go this way across. Shows that there's water there and that the lilies are floating on them. So I'm just gonna kind of put some little lines in there so it looks like it's floating. So you can go ahead and you can fill up your page. You can add some more lilies if you want. If you didn't use the watercolors for those lilies, you can go ahead. You can even put some that might be in the background. Now I'm going to make them a little smaller. So if there's some that I wanted to add that I didn't get to with my watercolor, I can just kind of put those in. So again, a little oval. And then I'm just going to make some little water lilies on top, a little teardrop shape. Okay, and you can just keep on adding. But that is the way we make Claude Monet's water lilies. So I hope you enjoyed that, and good luck, and I'll see you in our next lesson. Bye-bye.